guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I just wanted to do a video on rehabbing orchids using moss. So let's get started. So I did a moss run in the woods and collected some moss and sanitized it, and now it's ready for use. Check out my video on how I collect and clean moss. So I have a few of my mounted orchids here. This one is actually one that's in bloom, beautiful. But if you see here, we have some moss here already. It's looking kind of old. The roots are quite healthy, but I need to clean them up a little bit and add some new moss to that. Here is my Dendrobium nobile hybrid, and as you can see, the canes here look quite healthy. We have some new roots going on, but we also have a lot of older dried roots, and the moss is quite old, so it's time for a change. So I'm going to clean that one up as well. Here is my Zygopetalum hybrid here, and as you can see, it's quite dry looking. The moss isn't so wonderful looking, and it needs some more moss actually. It does have quite a few new roots coming out, and if you can see here, which I'm thrilled about, because this one went through quite a few phases here after it was mounted. As you can see here, we have quite a few new leaves coming out. So I'm excited to see that it's making progress. It just needs a little touch up. And here we have one of the orchids from my more recent orchid haul. The leaves are quite healthy looking, but as you can see here, the root system just looks kind of dead. Not very pleasant looking. So I'm going to clean up the root system, get rid of the old media, and prepare it for the new moss. Alright, so first I'm going to start with the potted orchid. That's my Teatime Jung-ho Diana. So this medium is really gross, old. It's wet because I watered the plants this morning, but let's see what's going on with the root system. I bought this orchid online in the winter time, so I wanted to wait till the weather was warmer to do a repotting here. So now it's that time. Okay. So we can see the root system doesn't look that great, although the plant itself seems to be doing fine. So let's trim off some of these dead roots here. I prefer to use moss because it allows the roots to spread more freely, and it allows the plants to aerate more, the roots to aerate more. So these all look dead. Okay, I think this is good for now. I wanted to put out some newer roots before I get rid of even more of the older roots here. But I think this is good. This will allow it to breathe. And I will do some follow-ups to see the progress. Alright, so I have my pot here. It has some river rocks to allow for better aeration and drainage. So I'm going to take some of the moss, put a little bit in the bottom here just to cover the stones. And then as I want the plant to be sturdy inside the pot, I am going to now place some moss, pressing it in to keep it firmly in place. I would actually prefer for all my orchids to be mounted on wood, but some do better than others. And for me, it's important that the plant has a really, really good root system before you mount it. And I'm not packing it too tightly because I like when the roots have the possibility to spread easily without being inhibited. All right, so that feels quite firm in there and it looks good. As the moss itself is very moist and I just watered the plants today, I won't need to water them for a few more days. All right, so that looks quite good. Next is my spotted fowl. That's in bloom. This one should go quite quickly. I'm just going to remove some of the older moss from there. The ones that look dead at least, because there's quite a bit of moss and some of it is fine. But I would say the majority of it is really old. So I'm going to just clean up the roots here really fast. I don't want to mess with it too much because the plant is in bloom, but I'm just anxious to get it refreshed. So I'm just trimming just the really dead ends here. Thankfully, this has a very good root system, and this is the one orchid that blooms several times of the year. So I think that looks good. So let me just get some fresh moss for it here. And I'm just very loosely pushing some moss between the roots here. I have it secured in place with a very sturdy but loose rubber band. So I also like to protect the roots from the rubber band by just placing some moss there. I think that's good. I don't want to mess with this one too much. All right. Next we have the Dendrobium nobile, and this one I'm just going to remove all of this. I'm going to remove this old moss here. Piece of wood is still sturdy enough for it, so I'm going to reuse it. So I'm gonna just take some pieces of moss here and just insert it under these bands here. And as the wood gets narrower here, I can just rest this on top. It doesn't need to go all the way through. Okay, so as you can see, the leaves here and the canes are quite healthy looking. Again, this one went through quite a transition over the period of time that it's been mounted. I'm going to get rid of the old pieces of moss here, and as I do that, you can see more and more of the newer roots. See that? New roots here and lots of older ones mixed in, so I have to be careful when trimming it. I don't want to cut any of the newer ones. So the older ones, dead ones, are quite dry, sort of spongy. And somewhat thinner than the newer ones. So while they're easier to see, it's just everything is all entangled here. So I probably won't get rid of all of them because there's so many of them, and they also help to anchor the plant in place. But just as long as the majority of the old moss is removed and the plant can breathe healthily and not be restricted, is my goal. Okay, I think that's cleaned up well. I don't want to mess with it anymore because again, we have quite a few newer roots entangled in there, and I would prefer that they stay healthy. Let's try to remove this little part here. Okay, so it's looking quite good. So now and this is where some of the older, drier roots come in handy. They help to anchor the plant in place. So I'll just take some of the moss here and protect the roots from the rubber bands that I'm using. Just trimming off some of the older canes that are sticking out. Okay. And I'm just placing a little bit more here for these longer roots that they have someplace soft to land as they grow further. Next we have the Zygopetalum hybrid, and this one is in a terrible state, although the plant itself is looking healthy. The root system here is in a terrible state, so let's get it cleaned up. All right, so this is what it looks like. This is an old moss from about 2 years ago, or when I first mounted this. Right, we will get some moss here to cover the wood. I'm just inserting a little bit here. This one is bound together with wires, and I have a rubber band here for the roots itself. Okay, as far as the root system goes, you can see the lovely new roots here and the older roots going on here. So I'm going to clean this one up. Being very careful not to cut any of the good roots. Again, I might leave a few of the longer, older ones to help anchor the plant in place. I'm removing some of the moss from between the roots here, very gently, because I don't want to kill any of these newer roots. This one went through quite a bit of changes. I'm glad to see it's doing well. Okay, so I think I will leave it like this, and as it progresses, then I could always remove more of the dead ones here, but I need some of it to help anchor the plant in place. So I'm going to try to position this one a little bit more upright than it was before. And in order to do that, I secured one end here, which has the older dead roots that are helping to anchor it in place. I've secured those there with a rubber band, and on this side, I'm going to add some extra moss here to help bolster it here. And I'm pushing in somewhat firmly. Because with time the moss will sort of shrink, I feel. And I'm also going to put a little bit in here as well, just to protect these roots. Not too much, but I just want the roots to be nestled in a little bit of the moss, which helps to keep some of the moisture in, because the air where I live is quite dry. And I'll just put a few more tiny pieces within the leaf system here so that the roots and future roots will have a good environment to grow. Okay, so I decided to add some moss to some of the other orchids from my more recent orchid haul. So this is a Jinsbong Wish Classical. The root system is actually quite good. Here is the bark that it came in. I'm going to just add some river rocks to the bottom of the pot here, which helps with aeration. I'm going to put some of the media in there and secure the plant in there as well. Add a little bit more of the media. The media looks quite good, guys, otherwise I'd have put brand new media, but it looks fairly new. And of course I wanted to sort of have the same environment that it's been growing in. Okay, so that's quite sturdy in there. So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of moss around the top. This will help retain the moisture in between waterings and also give the roots a nice atmosphere to grow in. I'm just putting it very, very gently on there, as I like when it's loose. So here is my Leila Cattleya orchid, and this one I had mounted for quite some time, about 2 years now, and it wasn't doing so well. It probably needed more moss, but I wasn't able to get it until now. So I've decided to remove it from the wood mount and place it in this glass jar so it gets a lot of light. And I have some river rocks at the bottom and put some moss to hold the roots in place. Okay, this one I just watered it. I left the water in it for a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and then I just poured it off. This moss dries out fairly quickly, so I'm confident that it'll provide enough moisture for it in between waterings. As you can see, the leaves are quite dehydrated. There's a new leaf coming out here. You can see some new roots here and another shoot coming out here. So I am anxious to see how it'll do in this media here. If it does well with the roots, I probably will return it to the wood mount, but I just want the root system to get healthy again. Here I have the Rachara Francis Fox from my newer orchid haul. This one also wasn't doing very well. Remember the yellowing leaves, and this one has a new shoot coming out here and also a brand new bulb system here. So I decided to clean it up a little bit and also add some moss to this. So I will definitely be following the progress of this one and all of them really, just to see how they're doing. Here I also have a fowl that wasn't doing so well until recently. Well, to be honest, this one went through several phases. It did well and it didn't do so well, and it could be to do with the temperature, the weather, the seasons, I'm not quite sure. The leaves were extremely dehydrated, but it's actually doing better than it was before. And again, it's probably to do with the fact that the moss on it was just older and just needed to be changed. The first time I mounted this was the very first time I mounted orchids, so I'm also learning through this process. So I cleaned it up a little bit and gave it some new moss. As you can see here, there are a lot of air roots because I also mist these orchids daily a little bit just to, keep it moist and keep the environment nice and humid as I like it. We will keep up on the progress of this one as well. I also have the Renee Marcus and Schilleriana from my more recent orchid haul, and this one I cleaned up the roots. This one wasn't doing so well. I didn't like how the leaves looked, even though it was still green. They looked, not so healthy, and I didn't like how it looked, so I cleaned up the roots and left the original media as well, which is bark, but I did top it here with some moss. So let's see how this one does. Here I have my young dung that was mounted on a piece of wood here. The moss that this came with was just one clump. It dried out really fast, so I decided just to add some additional moss to this. I used some mesh that came from packaging from some fruits that I bought. As it's green in color, it camouflages well. So it helps to secure the looser moss around the original clump of moss. And I feel it'll do much better with more moss around it. This is a Brassicantha Gyrac Red Star from my newer orchid haul. And this one is doing okay, but I just decided to add a few pieces of moss within the roots and the leaves themselves, just for added moisture retention. And here we have the Talumna scandens. If you saw my recent 6-month update, it's been in rehab because for some reason it was just losing leaves and becoming very dry and dead looking. So I've remounted it back on the piece of wood that I had prepared using some moss, and we'll follow the progress of this one. So there you have it, guys, my orchid moss rehab. Thanks for watching.